What's up y'all, it's Izzy and I'm back with another So You Think You Want to Build a Skoolie video, and today's video will focus on demoing my bus. And so if you were here, if you were contemplating whether demoing your bus is right for you, or maybe you're even contemplating whether or not you want to buy a bus if it's this much work to demo it, this is the video for you, and welcome. I'm so glad to have you all here. Today we have a special treat. We get to talk to past Izzy. Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that great? Yeah, but that was me filming. I guess it was probably around March at that time, and it is now August. The time does fly, and we are still sitting in a very similar spot on the bus, and that frustrates me, but it's okay because life is moving on. And if I had been a little bit more determined to get things done, I guess it would be a little further along than it is now. If you want to know why I didn't get any footage, so much footage for this last demolition video, I have a little bit of an explanation for that, and so that's what future Izzy will go into saying first. But if you could care less about that, I will put a time that you can skip to, or you can follow along with the chapters and it will skip you right past that explanation. But I think I'm darn funny, so maybe you should keep watching it. It's probably not actually that funny, and it wasn't that entertaining. So I didn't really cover this while we were doing stuff, and I swear I meant to get a time lapse of the other side, but we just got so caught up in it. And by we, I mean my grandparents. I mean, like, normally, you know, people are just like, oh, grandparents, like, you need to do stuff for them. Like, they came here, I asked for, like, help, because, like, one, I'm bad at getting screws out. My papa's, like, a genius whiz at it. And I just really wanted some guidance about, like, how I should go about doing things, and I needed an extra hand. And everyone else in my life seems to be busy, except for my elders. So invited them down, and they were like busting down walls, pushing me out of the way. I'd be like, let me help, and they'd be like, no, we got it, you sit down, you've done all kinds of work, you just. And I'm like, please let me help. And then so finally I would get into the groove with them, and then we'd just keep going, and I was like, wait, I was supposed to do that at the camera for that. Ooh. So that's why we didn't have a lot of footage this time. And honestly, I'm just putting this out there right now. People who make videos about building or anything, really just make videos in general where they're not sitting and talking about a topic, it takes so much longer to actually film the process of doing something than it does to actually get it done. And that's why I find myself not filming a lot. It's because, like, if I have a simple task, I need to get it done, because usually I have a lot of work to do, and so, like, it takes me 10 times longer to get that done if I'm trying to film. So let's talk about some things that you will need to use and probably should have in your toolkit or in mind if you're going to take off these walls, because I could be dumb, but I really don't hear a lot of people talking about this. So let's talk about it. First of all, one of the major things I used to take these panels off was a drill, and the floor piece, of course, a drill. And maybe screw gun is what you call it. I don't have it out here with me because I left it in the house because I'm supposed to be charging it and I haven't charged it yet. Anyways, drill. What is vital is that you have the correct bits. You have the correct screw, like, you know, the correct bits for the screws that are in the walls and in the floor. I find best, especially for the floor where there's muck and stuff in the screws, it works better if you have a dull head on your screw. Like, if it's a Phillips, it works best with a dull head. And some of the wall screws even work better with, like, a square head instead of a Phillips, but that's a different point. If you are not careful, you will strip it, and my best luck to you, I don't have it with me, but I will post a picture somewhere in this area, is to get yourself one of the screw stripping kits. The one I use is like a name brand, like Speed Out or whatever, but I mean, they have them at Harbor Freight for like $9. So really simple. The only issue that I had is that when I was drilling one of the screws, they were working beautifully, but the screws would get stuck on the end of it, so maybe I needed to drill it out a little bit more. But then I tried to beat the screw off of the one, and then when I stuck it in like the third time to get the third screw out, the bit that's supposed to take it out broke off in the screw. So that was my bad. That was user error, or maybe it was a defaulty product. We'll never know. I guess if people have luck with Speed Outs not breaking on them, then it was indeed my fault. But if you don't have one of those handy dandy Speed Outs, what you can do is use a hammer and a screwdriver. Now, this screwdriver is my fancy dad's screwdriver, so I'm not going to admit to the fact that I may or may not have used this on a couple screws, and my pebble may or may have not. But basically, you want to put the screwdriver right in the hole and then just hit it. Bang it into the screw really good, and so that lets it get a better grip. And so then you can take your drill, hold it up there and take it out. Also, a helpful hint is just take the hammer and just hit around it, because that'll help jar it loose, because it usually needs to be jarred loose. If all else fails, of course you can use a speed out like I said before, or you can take some sort of like grinder like so and take the screw heads off. Or you don't have a grinder, just get you a nice little like crowbar, take your hammer, beat it in behind it, and use some brute strength. And two, I think you can just drill the heads off of the screws, but that takes a long time. I noticed in my bus, every bus is different. That's another thing to keep in mind. Like every single bus is different. Mine has rivets, or had rivets, it's like right here between the panels and below the windows. And so what we did there is just simply just like took a drill bit and drilled it, and it popped right off. And if you don't know what I mean by rivets, then I will show an example of one here while I'm talking over it. And so that is how the different methods I use to get the screws out of the floor and out of this. On the floor ones, I also did use like this bigger crowbar, well my cousin did, and I'll put that footage in somewhere around here. And we just kind of like beat on the metal pieces and pulled until the screws literally were ripped from the floorboards. But it's okay, because I'm sealing all those holes anyways, and it didn't really make a bigger hole than what was there in the first place. On to how I got the metal sheets out. Now I don't know if you can tell, but this is really thin material. And so my dad first hypothesized that we could use a Dremel tool on it, but the Dremel did not work. So instead he went and he got the grinder out. Well, I'm adverse to the sight of sparks. That is not for me. That is a no-no. And I said the whole time, like, why can't I just use some sort of like 10 shears, some 10 snips, something like that? And my dad's like, because it'll take forever and you'll cut your hands to pieces. Well, I reached out to my papa, and the lovely thing, his brother let us borrow his nice 10 shears, and these are nice. These are nice to have. And so about 3 panels in, we exhausted the disc on the grinder, and so it wasn't very conducive. I guess if you had more panels it would be alright, but we got a pretty good process with this. What we would do is one person would, well, once we drill out all the panels, you can kind of like turn them up. So instead of them being flat here, you can kind of turn them up like this. And what we would do was one person would help hold it up, and then the other person would go in about this far down so that it can be tucked underneath later, so the sharp edges won't be sticking out. And another person would go that far down, clip into it. The first cut's always the hardest cut. After that, it's like cutting paper with these. And then the person on the outside would have some leverage and pull backwards on the panel as the person went up, snipping the panel. I hope that makes sense, because it seems like it makes sense to me. And that usually went really quick and pretty painless. When we get to sections like this, where there was a post and there was a panel that ran straight across the post, I don't know if you can tell, but we just kind of angled the cuts upwards so that they can be bent under later, and we just snip that afterward, like snip, snip. These were really fun. I really enjoyed working with these, so thank you to my papa's brother. If he's watching, I highly doubt he's watching. He probably doesn't care about this. So that is how we extracted the panels. Now on to the floor. So pulling up the floor is really quite a controversial matter, because like the first few images, first few clips of video, first few images probably showed this really well. It was a very tedious process. I mean, they were coming up in chunks like from this big to maybe like, you know, this big. And it would just depend on what section you were in, how good of a thing you had going. And I really just think they put more glue in some places than others, or because of the way that the bus was worn when it was driven. It came up in different ways. I did get some footage of me pulling the middle piece out, of course, and that was one of the easiest pieces to pull out, because I literally you could just pull it. Now, thankfully, oh my gosh, it was so blissful when we got to the other side, this side of the bus instead of that side over there. When Mama and Papa were here, I thought, well, since they won't let me do anything, I'm just going to get down on the floor and start working again. And so what I would do, what we started out doing, was using this tool. What was most effective for me is just kind of bumping the glue spot over and over and over again. And after bumping it like so many times, it just pops up. And so I did that painstakingly slow on that side of the bus. Then we got to this side of the bus, I was working at the back. I noticed it was coming up in big sheets, so that was really nice. And so a couple nights ago, my dad had suggested that I use a shovel. And so I have this shovel out here. I needed really more of like a straight nose one that was sharp, but this one did the job that day. When we were pulling up in a big panel, you just go along and just scrape this and use it in the same method that I used the crowbar there. And it like just really helped the process go a lot easier. One person was pulling it while I was like shoving underneath it, and that helped it go a lot further. Now at first I was not going to remove the covers from the wheel wells, because at first I thought, well, like, is that a whole metal piece? Because like the way it was assembled, I was like, that's really strange. But I realized it's just vinyl over top of it. I need to get and do the one on this side of the bus. My papa was gracious enough to take this side off, mostly because he refused to sit there and do nothing. And so eventually I was just like, okay, if you are not going to sit down voluntarily, then sit down and just work on this piece right here, like work on taking the screws out. So I got him to do that, and I'm really glad that I did, and I'm really glad that I decided to take up the floor. I was surprised that most of this bus is actually, the floor is in really good condition. A lot of people have a lot more trouble with rust than I did. I only have like two spots in the back that really were concerning to me, and then I've noticed around the wheel wells there's a little bit more rust. So past Izzy got to tell you about the floors and the walls, because past Izzy had not got to the ceilings yet, but this Izzy has. And so now I'm going to share you little tricks. So I watched Cola Adventures video on taking down their ceilings, and oh my gosh, that looked like such a nightmare, and I was so freaking terrified. I was like, I know all these screws are going to be stripped, because all the wall screws were stripped and all the floor screws were stripped. Note that I, most of the time, accidentally stripped them myself, because I wasn't using the correct drill bit or the correct force, which is what I warned you about before. So when it came to doing the ceiling, I was like, but then it was super easy, and it was like nothing. Like, it was just like, this video that I'm playing is like not in fast motion, and it was just coming out like so blissfully, so easy, and I was like, thank you, thank you, thank you. But when it came down to the getting off the panels actually from the sides, we did take use of the lovely crowbars again. We mostly used the smaller one instead of this bigger one. This bigger one was only if we needed like some extra leverage, but this one was really good at giving us some leverage. So what we would do is we'd go to the corners and we'd stick it in, and we would pop the panels up and over these little tabs that are here on the side that kind of keep it all held up there. When it comes down to doing the ceilings, this is something that you will definitely need two people to do. I know that I talked about I used two people to take the wall panels off. During this whole process, it's probably good to have two people around, if not more than two people around, especially if you're using power tools and you're not used to using power tools, but it's always good to have someone around if you're using power tools, just in case you hurt yourself. So I hope that information was helpful and helped you come closer to making your decision. I did a whole spiel in the last time I tried to film this video that I'm going to leave here for anyone who cares to know. So if you are the one person that's kind of weighing your options on whether you should go ahead and tear out the interior of the bus or not, I can kind of share a little bit of light on that, because my grandparents have converted buses in the past, and so I kind of know like what it's like to have a bus that hasn't been gutted on the inside. And what you can do. So if this is kind of like your weekend camper or something like that, it might not be that big of a deal to gut everything. I know my grandparents did say though, if they ever got a bus again to make into a camper, that they would gut the entire interior, because what happens is without the interior gutted, you have metal on metal contact from the outside to the interior. So even though that there is insulation already inside buses, the problem is that of course we have metal roofs, and then we have metal beams in those roofs, and those metal beams are contacting metal on the inside. So what is happening is, no matter if there's insulation in between, the heat is still going directly through the metal beam inside and heating up this metal, and it just kind of like spreads out and radiates and heats the entire thing. Same thing with the cold. It's bad. The contact, metal on metal contact, is bad for insulation. It's just bad for insulating an interior, and it doesn't often go well. That's the gist of it. You're going to be working a lot harder to heat and cool your bus if you have it that way. So if you are living this in full time and you're going to stay in a mild climate or travel with the weather, then it might not be such a big deal for you to strip all the metal out, because you might be okay with controlling the climate. But if not, what you might find yourself dealing with is super hot ceilings in the summer, or condensation, because I know we were camping one time in the spring, I think it was, and we had a heater inside the bus going. When we woke up in the morning, there was literally like water droplets dripping down and hitting our faces, because the outside temperature was so cold and the inside temperature was so warm that the metal on top of the bus was like condensating. But if you're having any hesitation about whether you should demo it or not, like I was having hesitation about whether to take out the ceiling or not, because I didn't know how big of a task that would be and how hard it would be to get insulation and everything back up, I would just recommend you just go ahead and go for the plunge, because you will not regret it afterwards. I mean, sometimes you look at all the work that has to be done after you do it and you might regret it, but you really won't regret it once it's all done. And if you're having that regret, you think that it's worth it to go ahead and do it. So I would just go ahead and go through and do it. Now, I can be done with my spiel. I'm sure when I go back to edit this, I will hate myself, but I hope it is like somehow cohesive or somehow coherent to you all, and hope it was helpful. If you have any more questions about demolition or the process of going through to demo a bus, be sure to leave those down below and I will answer those when I can. You can reach out to me on my Facebook page. Also, as always, I do these videos for people who are like me, who need a little extra like push to kind of get into it, to know what they were doing, or don't have a clue what they're doing at all and just like the information, or maybe you know what you're doing but you have no clue how demoing a bus works or how building in a bus works, and this might be helpful to you. That's all it takes, is just one person for it to be helpful for, and it makes it all worth it to me. So thank you guys so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already. I post videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 o'clock. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye.